Welcome to this explainer. Today we are diving into corporate lobbying and the 2026 green card reversal. We're looking at May 2026, when a sweeping immigration policy collided right head-on with the combined force of corporate America. It's a massive story about just how crucial global talent is to American economic competitiveness, and we're going to break down exactly how it all unfolded.
2 words: go home. I mean, just imagine hearing that. That was the blunt, honestly startling directive issued by U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And this was aimed at foreign nationals who were already living and working legally in the U.S. Seriously, imagine going to work on a Tuesday, you're building the next generation of software, or maybe researching a medical breakthrough, and suddenly you're told that to finalize your permanent residency, you have to pack up your entire life and leave the country.
Now, this directive was a literal policy bombshell dropped by the Trump administration in late May 2026. Looking at this strictly from a neutral standpoint, the administration's stated goal here was to restore what they viewed as the original intent of immigration law. Basically, their argument was that temporary visas should be treated strictly as temporary stays. So visiting the U.S. shouldn't just function as an automatic first step in the green card process. They wanted applicants to actually return to their countries of origin to wait out the entire application process.
Okay, let's dive into this mechanical shift. Historically, the U.S. immigration system offered this pathway called adjustment of status. It's exactly what it sounds like. It allowed a worker on an H-1B visa or a student on an F-1 visa to transition to a green card without ever actually having to leave the U.S. This meant absolute continuity for both the worker and their employer. But the proposed rule, it sought to completely dismantle that historical pathway, replacing it with this new, hard requirement to return to your country of origin and wait.
Well, the moment this policy hit, it sent immediate, massive economic shockwaves straight through American boardrooms, tech hubs, and university labs. And the immediate concern wasn't just, logistical, it was existential. Corporate leaders instantly recognized the threat of a massive talent exodus. Think about it. If you force your most highly skilled workers to leave, you are fundamentally threatening American economic competitiveness on the global stage.
To really grasp why the corporate world hit the panic button, we need to look at the sheer scale of this threat. 1.3 million. That is the number of H-1B visa holders and their families who were abruptly staring down a complete logistical nightmare. We are talking about 1.3 million people deeply embedded in the American economy who suddenly had their entire futures thrown into complete uncertainty. Because, look, returning home isn't just a quick vacation or a weekend trip to get some paperwork stamped. It's a massive, multi-year disruption. For software engineers from India or China, it meant entering a backlog that can literally last years due to per-country caps. For Russian nationals, practically impossible because of embassy closures. So we are talking about really severe human and operational costs. Families being forced to sell their homes, kids being pulled out of American schools, and companies losing their absolute top talent right in the middle of critical projects. And this brilliantly illustrates the tech sector's immediate panic. Andrew Ng, the co-founder of Coursera and a massive global voice in artificial intelligence, he did not hold back. He called it a capricious attack on legal immigration that would leave the U.S. with fewer doctors, teachers, and scientists. The tech industry relies so heavily on global talent to compete in things like AI and cloud computing. Leaders like Ng were warning that this would severely damage America's position in the global AI race. And he definitely wasn't the only one sounding the alarm. Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, publicly questioned the whole logic behind it, calling it a harmful move for tech, business, and America broadly. Gary Tan, the CEO of the startup incubator Y Combinator, stressed that the U.S. desperately needs to retain the world's brightest minds to build tomorrow's businesses. For these leaders, stopping this talent exodus wasn't just an HR issue. It was an absolute existential necessity for American innovation.
But here's where it gets really interesting. It wasn't just Silicon Valley stepping up to the microphone. The outcry quickly transitioned to the broader financial and retail worlds, and it really marked a historic turning point in corporate courage. Traditionally, a lot of CEOs prefer to stay entirely silent on hot-button political issues just to avoid any kind of retaliation. But in 2026, that silence was officially broken. Wall Street legend Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Chase, actually used the massive global stage at the World Economic Forum in Davos to plead for a calmer approach. He firmly stated, "We need these people. They're good people. They should be treated that way." Now, while his comments were initially sparked by viral videos of aggressive immigration enforcement, his message applied directly to the green card debate. It clearly signaled that the financial sector was fully aligning with the tech sector on the absolute necessity of foreign labor.
And Dimon's focal stance was actually part of a much broader 2026 trend. More than 60 CEOs from major mainstream brands, we're talking Target, Best Buy, General Mills, they had all recently signed an open letter demanding de-escalation from the government. This was following a tragic incident where an individual named Alex Preddy was killed by federal agents during an enforcement action in Minnesota. The private sector was just reaching a breaking point. Executives were realizing that staying silent was no longer sustainable when these policies were actively disrupting their operations and their workforce. Now, what's really interesting about this next point is that the public statements were really just the tip of the iceberg. Behind the scenes, the business world launched a massive, highly coordinated lobbying blitz to prevent this impending economic disruption. So how exactly did they fight back? Well, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is literally the largest lobbying group in the country, got involved directly, warning of irreversible harm to the workforce. CEOs and their reps were absolutely flooding the White House and the Department of Homeland Security with calls. They even opened private back channels, speaking directly with administration confidants like Howard Lutnick and the Kushner family. They stripped away all the politics and just hammered home one strictly economic message. America simply cannot afford a talent exodus. It will break the economy. Let's look at the timeline here, because the sheer speed of this reversal is pretty incredible. Late May, the policy drops. Days later, the tech industry screams. Shortly after that, the Chamber of Commerce and that whole back-channel lobbying blitz kicks into high gear. And then within days of that lobbying effort, USCIS is holding private meetings walking the policy back. They clarified that most immigrants wouldn't actually have to leave the country. So once that unified corporate threat to American competitiveness became crystal clear, the administration pivoted its messaging incredibly fast. Which brings us to the aftermath, something we can call the fragile future. Yes, officials clarified that the return home requirement wouldn't be the default setting, so the immediate crisis was averted. The doors are remaining open for skilled workers, at least for now. But that underlying tension between immigration policy and corporate needs, that remains very much alive. So where does this leave the foreign national? It's a huge question. Where does it leave the engineer, or the doctor, or the scientist who is currently relying on the U.S. immigration system to build their life and contribute to the economy? Honestly, the answer is that they are left in a state of lingering uncertainty. See, adjustment of status is classified by USCIS as a discretionary benefit. It is not an absolute legal right. And that means that while the immediate panic from May 2026 might be over, the administration still technically maintains the legal authority to aggressively reduce legal immigration and actually mandate that return home in the future. That lever is still right there, waiting to be pulled. But there is one major thing that has fundamentally changed, and it's our final takeaway for this explainer. When policy moves from general border security to what the private sector views as workforce destruction, the business world will fight back. The president wanted green card applicants to go home, but the titans of industry proved that when American economic competitiveness is on the line, American CEOs are no longer afraid to pick that fight with the White House. Will this newfound corporate courage be enough to protect the global talent pipeline long-term? That is the billion-dollar question we'll all be watching. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.